My name is Anastasia and I'm an epoxy resin artist as well as an ambassador for the craft resin family. Join me today at the Arc Le Salon restaurant in London for a very special reason. This venue here features an incredible installation made of a variety of materials including craft resin, created by the talented artist Nia. We will dive deeper into the details of these pieces and learn more about Nia. So let's get started with the interview. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? So, sort of how long you've been working with epoxy resin and how did your journey in this art form begin?
Generally, I've been in this business I started my own things and design as a designer. My path as a designer and creating installations, I started from 2021. But working with resin, so I started with mainly preserved, dried, and artificial in a floral concept, creating large installations, trees and forests and stuff like that. And then it went as I went on, I tried to be more interested in different kind of materials and with the resin, epoxy resin. I mean, I started with UV resin first. When I started with UV resin for a particular section of a design that I was doing. I wanted to create some mushrooms and build them and design them and just get it the way I wanted. And I actually used UV resin for that part. But then after that, that was actually the start of me getting interested in resin in general. And I kept saying from that side, at that time that I did this, I kept saying to my friends and my colleagues that this is just the first small piece of big things that I'm gonna do in future with resin. I'm gonna have definitely bigger pieces because I loved how it ended up with these little mushrooms. So then for the project after that, I started with resin and especially epoxy resin. So because of course there are two different kinds and some small pieces and based on the curing time, let's say, it's easier to use UV in some places, but of course with bigger pieces and making bigger statements, epoxy is the best. So I say in the first pieces of epoxy that we started to making them in September 2023.
And that's when you started to, is that when you started to kind of fall in love with it? Or
exactly, so I started completely, it wasn't something that I used before. And as I said, I was feeling very adventurous to create what I had in my mind. And based on the design I was creating, especially for the cave, there was a different kind of finish I wanted. I wanted the finish of the glass, I wanted the gold, I wanted the wood, I wanted the stone. And for different things, we use different, for all these different finishes, we use different materials for the water, for the kind of getting that kind of reflection out of the design. We used glass and epoxy resin.
So you combined both glass and
yes, so a glass for the drops of water, and then I would have loved to be able to create them with epoxy resin as well, but in the end we decided to use epoxy for patches of water and just for a wider look, and then for the glass, for the drops of water we used glass.
When you first started obviously using the UV resin, did you kind of see it dries so quickly?
Yes.
Did you, and then obviously epoxy takes time to sort of cure and things. Was there a preference that you prefer using most out of two of them? Sort of, obviously it's so different as well.
The thing with the UV resin that's different from epoxy is that you have more control over it, I think. Yeah. So you can keep a torch in your hand and the UV resin in the other hand and just draw a shape with it and just torch it and then it's there. You can just control the movement with it, and of course for some stuff that you, for example, you have just one mold, or two mold, which I had for those mushrooms in particular. I only had maybe two mold with 4 mushroom shapes inside them.
Wow, okay.
So I didn't have multiple molds. No. So therefore I needed something that's faster. And I needed, I don't know, about 200 mushrooms, for example.
Wow.
And I only had 8 molds of mushrooms. So in that case, I thought, okay, so definitely this is not going to work with epoxy resin because it's 24 hours, I don't have that long. I want 200 mushrooms in a couple of days. So therefore we decided to just to actually just use UV resin and just dry them, use the light, the lamp, and just get all these mushrooms out of it. And of course, as I said, the other thing is that the stem of the mushroom. The stem of the mushroom, I used a metal wire. It was a thick metal wire that we used that is shapeable and flexible. We could, kind of use it in different settings. So again, with that, I needed something that it can just be applied. I can just put it as part of the head of the mushroom, just there and then, and it dries up and it's part of it.
Yeah.
So again, UV resin was the best thing to use. You can't really do that with epoxy.
No.
So that's why I'm saying it. There's more control. You have more control over UV and less curing time. But of course, for some pieces, UV doesn't really make sense, and epoxy is the best way. If you're making much bigger pieces, which I've been making in the previous design, in this design that we filmed, or the next one that's coming up, of course it's epoxy, epoxy resin. And as I said before as well, sometimes I just don't want to have any control over the paint. I just want it to kind of follow its own flow and just nature and just go wherever it wants to go. So with the cave, for example, I just poured in the patches of the water, and they just followed, and they just found the epoxy in the cave, or the water, as I call it. It just found its own way where to go, just in that kind of cave surface. It just went wherever it wanted to go. I didn't even have any control over it, just to stop it here or stop it there. I let it go wherever it wanted to go and just dry up as it is. So again, that's something else I like about epoxy.
Yeah, it is it floats with obviously like the water, and you have so many aspects of water in your installations as well.
Yes.
So allowing that free flow is just
exactly.
how it actually is.
Exactly. So the surface, there are a lot of barriers in there as a cave surface. There's like melted lava, and there's like the rocky part, and then the water or the resin will find its own as it is in nature. As it is in nature, again, resin is representing water in here, so it's finding its own way to go through, which is beautiful at the same time and very symbolic, I think.
So sort of the inspiration process, what inspired you to create this particular installation, and can you describe the process of working on it as well?
So there are multiple installations in this venue, and two of them, the glowworm cave used resin, and then the frozen lake used resin as well. And both of them, the inspirations of course came from nature, and the parts of nature that I mean with the glowworm resin, I'd love to go and see those with the glowworm cave, I'd love to go and see them in New Zealand, but unfortunately it's not possible for now. Maybe one day. So I tried just to take that idea and redesign it and bring it in life here. And with the frozen landscape or frozen lake, that was because I just, winter is one of my favorite seasons, and I love especially with the frozen landscapes, the frost, the icy parts. I love them, and in this case it was just inspired by a scene, a photograph that I saw, and I wanted to create it upside down from again, which was, I think, was an interesting part to kind of look at this lake upside down, and this frozen landscape that you can look at it, and the leaves that are kind of trapped inside that frost and ice.
It's almost like if you kind of look underneath the ice, it's almost as if you're trapped under it as well. So
yes.
It's almost like the above.
Yeah, that too.
Beyond,
yes, exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
And sort of with the inspiration side of things, you said obviously you found a photo on Pinterest as well. Do you sort of go around visiting sort of areas where it is more wooded, or any lakes that you've come across? Do you take photos, or do you draw them, or is it sort of you kind of immerse yourself within that as well?
So in the designs I do, I think sometimes it's the ideas come to me when I'm traveling myself, when I'm in nature, when I'm in. So some of the ideas come from there.
Yeah.
Some of the ideas come from like just seeing something on the news, or as I said, Pinterest is one of the best places to have a look at the nature. photos, sometimes they come from the internet or from other people's photos, and sometimes the designs that I do, they're completely imaginary. So again, they have roots of nature, but they have my imagination as well. So sometimes it's very surreal, you know, the kind of what I'm trying to create. Yes.
And that is sort of surrealism, sort of with the colours and sort of the textures. And sort of
the textures, colours, and the whole setting. Yes.
And then sort of challenges and overcoming them. So what sort of challenges did you face during the creation of these pieces?
Well, I would say when I was creating the global cave, it was, I think, again, as I said, with the resin, I let it just go its own way as water. So it was much easier to kind of, because I didn't have any, and I didn't want any control over it. I didn't want to interfere in the process. So, and I wanted to look wilder and how it is in the nature, the water, how the water is actually in nature, patches of water on a surface of a cave. So that was, I would say, it was good. It was okay. I didn't have any problems with it, considering that it was my first try with resin, epoxy resin. But creating the frozen lake was very challenging because, as I mentioned, because it's going in a bar on a ceiling, so I needed to make sure that the weight is right, and resin can be very heavy, and I wanted to be able to get the design out from the depth so I wanted it to be thin, less heavy, but at the same time I wanted to get the depth. So to kind of get to that and how to get to that, it was challenging. But I would say the biggest challenge I had in creating the frozen lake was getting it flat. You know, just having that, because again it was going on a flat surface in the ceiling, so I needed to make sure that these panels, the containers that we're using for resin, or the resin itself, it dries, it cures in a way that it's flat and it can just sit nicely on the ceiling, not to be not to be like wobbly, or to not to be straight. So that was the challenge. That was the biggest challenge I had with the frozen lake. So in the end, it actually, unfortunately, it was not fully straight or flat that I wanted, which was one of the main lessons that I learned working in resin for the first time in this regard. That of course, to create to make sure, if I want it to be flat, of course, to make sure that it's the scale is right, and it's going to be that everything is ready for it to be curing in the way I want it to be cured. So I think it was more challenging because I needed to control it this time, to just kind of fit it into that kind of context I wanted. So it was challenging. Yes.
Did you pour the resin sort of in the containers and they were essentially the molds, and that you would then take them out of the containers, or did you attach them to the container and then through the wall? Okay,
so again, that was another challenge, because I'm sure a lot of people that work with resin, epoxy resin, they know that there are not many molds around, especially not many big molds around. So if you want to have like a 1 by 1 meter kind of square 1 by 1 meter, for example, made out of epoxy resin, it's very difficult to find a mold that's that big. And if you want to get it customized and get someone else's to make it for you, another company, it's expensive, and it's usually a long waiting time. So in this regard, what we did, frozen landscape, this frozen lake that we've created, it includes 4 panels. I think they are roughly about 1 by 1 meter each of them.
Okay.
So when we were building it, again, I needed to keep in mind that they need to be transferred from the studio to be installed in the venue. So therefore, we couldn't make them bigger than that. I needed to make them in pieces that we can actually carry, and of course they can be heavy if they're bigger than 1 by 1. So this one, in the end, we decided to go 4 panels, 1 by 1. So together they would be 4 meters long and 1 meter wide. And for that, in the end, I decided not to actually use a mold. So what we did, we actually used acrylic sheets.
Oh, okay.
So I found a company that worked with acrylic sheets, and they created their own thing. So they could create anything out of acrylic sheets.
Oh my God.
So I gave them these the drawings and the measurements I wanted, and I told them just create these containers out of acrylic sheets and with the edges. So this one is about 2 centimeters, I think, thick. So the acrylic was about the thickness of the sheet for acrylic was about 0.5 millimeters, and then 1.5 centimeters on top. So together it's about 2 centimeters with the resin inside.
Yeah.
So it has the edges as well. It did have the edges, and they were just containers one by one with that kind of the height that we wanted. So we just poured the resin inside, but at the same time, it did kind of, because the surface wasn't, as I said, wasn't flat enough. It still had a bit of, it wasn't fully straight, let's say, even inside the containers. But at the time of installation, we managed to kind of put it in shape and just flatten it down, flatten it down, and just put it into the ceiling in the right way. But that's what we did. Instead of using mold, we decided to just use acrylic sheets with the resin to be, and I didn't need to remove the resin from it. I want, because it was like a clear, transparent acrylic sheet, and it was on the back of the lake, so not at the front. So it would have been easy, less expensive, and less time consuming less waiting time to kind of get that done, and pouring the resin inside and just get to what I wanted to create.
And would you say that you probably do using the acrylic again for future projects?
If I want to, yes, of course. If I want to, if it's in the same kind of design, definitely I would recommend it. But if I want to do this again, I will maybe use an acrylic sheet that is thicker. So it has less flexibility and it can keep it together. And of course, I make sure that definitely wherever the curing is it's kind of the right, it's completely flat. Especially if the panels are going into the ceiling or against the wall. So that's something I will change if I wanted to change it again, if I wanted to do it again. But so I've got another big projects coming up using epoxy resin, and in that we use something else as a kind of mold under the resin and get it into the way we wanted it to be.
And sort of source of inspiration, what inspires you to create new works and installations with the epoxy resin?
So it really depends. It really depends what the design is, and in what context it is, and if resin can represent it, what I want to create, if resin can represent it. So as I said, if it's like water, or the next design, the next project that I'm doing, it's ocean. So we try to build ocean in the way we wanted, in the most natural way possible. So then we decided to go with epoxy resin again in that as well. So it really depends on the nature of the design, and to choose the actual kind of medium that I'm going to use. So definitely, if it's something transparent, glassy, either I will, depending on the size of it, either I use epoxy or UV.
And it's sort of UV, is that for more of the detailed, smaller parts? And then obviously epoxy is brilliant for just having that blanket coverage as well.
Yes, definitely. So the next one that we created, the ocean, we built the ocean in the next design, which has an underwater theme. I have actually used both of them to create the ocean. So I've used epoxy, and I used in some parts of the pieces that we built for the ocean, I used UV resin.
Oh wow! Okay.
So where I needed control over the thing, I used UV, and then where I wanted it to just go its own way and get it done, I used epoxy. So I can give more details in the next one.
That sounds
very exciting.
I'm so excited to see the next one. I can't wait. And then sort of significance with projects. Can you share a project that was particularly significant or challenging for you, and what did you learn from that experience? So something you can take on to the next.
In the context of resin, or just in general?
In general and resin. I think it's quite interesting to know if that's okay.
So I think, the most challenging project that I've done was the glowworm cave. That's what I called it, because of course, as I mentioned, it's been inspired by glowworm cave caves in New Zealand. So that was the most difficult because, as I mentioned before, the path that I started my path using mainly creating like trees and very floral and using flowers and foliages. So as I went more forward in my artistic path, I decided to try different materials and just to get different finishes, different environments, just to create the setting that I have designed to get the best way, to get it the best way I want. So the glowworm cave, I can say that it was one of the most difficult that I've done, one of the most challenging and the time-consuming projects that I've done, because we built most of it. So it was designed and built, and it has so many materials inside of it. As I mentioned, it has glass, it has paper mache, it has clay, it has plaster, it has resin, it has gold leaves, many things, as well as natural products. And I wanted to create different kind of finishes. I wanted water, I wanted lava, I wanted rock, I wanted to have the wood in the right way. So there are so many different finishes that I wanted to create and effects that I wanted to create. So it was challenging to figure out how to actually build them, how to just to get to there. And of course, I'm sure you know, each one of these things, these materials that I'm saying, each one of them have their own challenges. Yeah. Working with plaster is a challenge. Working with resin is a different challenge. Paper mache has its own way. So each one of them have their own way of curing and molding and modeling, and and even taking colors, you know, even painting it. You cannot just paint them all in the same way, or they cannot take paint or color the same way as each other. So all of them have their own ways, and it was just getting them all right and putting them through this image and this one setting that was very time consuming and challenging, I'd say, yes. And of course, as I mentioned with the lake, the challenge was just getting it right, the right weight, the right size, joining up these panels in a way that it looks like a lake and not to be visible that they are pieces. Yeah. And of course, the most difficult part, to get them flat and kind of install them, because they were going against a flat ceiling. So that was the challenging part. Yes.
Challenge in itself, yeah. And then sort of when you piece all the things together, did you sort of work on bit by bit and then sort of see where that takes you, or did you have sort of a idea for how you knew it was going to turn out, and then anything that needed to be changed or adapted to your idea could then be?
So I had a bigger picture, of course. I knew what I wanted. It was always, it was of course all in my head. Yeah. But I made the small piece, and we made different sample looks, and with the final one, we just made more of that. Yeah. So that's how it actually. But of course, I wanted each of them to be looking different as well. Yeah. So the way of making them, they were all the same, but of course we tried to make it as much as possible natural, you know, not arranged. In the designs that I do, I try my best not to kind of for them not to look like they've been arranged and they look like an arrangement. I want them to be as much as possible similar to nature, have that wide kind of nature inside them, and be their own thing, you know, in their own way, not without my interference as much as possible. So.
Yeah. And did you sort of find from the transition from, obviously you did like the floral arrangement before and you transitioned to this as well, did you find that massively different in terms of technique?
Of course. So, of course. So I learned a lot in using flowers and foliage. Of course, where I am today, because I started as in floristry first, and I started to create my own installations inside the floristry kind of nature and context first. And I learned a lot about what I want to do, how do I actually get them into place similar to what I actually want in my designs. So I learned a lot of techniques, a lot of ways of doing things, and then I use these to kind of get out of the box as well and just try different areas. I am actually not using as much in the future in the designs that I'm doing now. I'm not using as much as what I used before, but I think what I learned is like I learned a lot from that part of it. I am kind of over it now. I'm trying to make it's more, as I said, going towards art installations now than floral installations, but I still love the floral installations that I've done, and I learned a lot of the basics and the techniques in that, which I again applied in the art installations that I'm doing now.
When obviously you started getting into the floral installations, so you started from the very start, how did you get into that?
So what happened, the story is that I actually had a completely different job in the past, and as part of my previous job I was doing, sometimes I was doing like decorations and, you know, just creating like environments for events like this, you know, like Christmas decorations, for example.
Yeah.
And a setting like that. And then when COVID hit,
yeah,
I decided, actually, I'm sure a lot of people in the world can say maybe the same thing happened to them and something happened or changed in their life. Yeah. And for me, it's the same scenario. I decided this is it for me now. And now that we are kind of in end of the world now, this virus, I just wanted to finally do what I actually want to do.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, this is what I've done in the past, a bit of this in the past, and I really liked, and I was successful doing it. So I just want to get into this. I just want to start creating these settings that people can walk in and just enjoy it. So I just started, as I said, in 2021. I did take some floristry lessons, and I started with floristry, mainly working with artificial and preserved, because those are the ones that I really like to use. I'm not really that much into fresh flowers. It's not really my thing.
Yeah.
Because the nature of the installations that I do and the designs that I do, again, as I mentioned before, either they are permanently in the location I do, or they are at least there for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that cannot be achieved with fresh flowers.
No.
There is a lot of work going into them, a lot of materials, money. So therefore, I would like them to at least stay, you know, for not less than 6 months. So they're permanent or semi-permanent. So therefore, that's you know, that's how it started. That's that's how it started, and it's been every project, every installation has been a different one from the before, never been the same. And the materials, even as you can see, I'm just, you know, it's just every time I'm doing different projects, different installations, they are like I'm putting the bar higher and higher and higher, and I'm getting more and more and more ambitious, which is I'm getting more and more out of my comfort zone, which sometimes I actually blame myself. Why am I not sticking to what I know? And I'm always trying to get something done that's new or using different things. So I sometimes I'm very adventurous. So I just and again I love to, as I said, I love to set design. It's really my interest, and I love to be able one day maybe to work in theaters and just do the settings over there, just to create the environment, as I said, that people can just go through it and just, you know, kind of feel it the way I feel it, and then you know, as I mentioned again before, just to kind of walk through the imagination that I have and the settings that I've created. Yeah. So it's really, that's really my thing.
So material choice, which resin did you use in your works and why? So obviously you mentioned the UV resin and the epoxy resin. Did you sort of use craft resin to start with?
Yes. So I have only used craft resin, to be honest with you. For the epoxy resin, I've only used craft resin. So the way I came across craft resin, of course I did my own research and looked at the reviews, what people had to say, and of course the artworks that have been created using craft resin, this brand, and I then decided to go for craft resin. And to be honest with you, I haven't changed it since then. I'm just using craft resin because I'm so happy with the craft resin, and especially with the customer service that I get. So I didn't even see the need to kind of look out there and just try different kind of resin. I'm happy with what I'm using. I'm getting the results that I want out of it. The transparency, the quality, the curing time is perfect. I'm used to using it. I know how to use it. And especially with the customer service that I'm having, and especially Gore been very helpful to me. Always answering my questions and being very, very, very patient with me because sometimes I throw a million questions at him. and he's always very prompt getting back to me about them. So everything's been very good, you know. My experience with epoxy, especially craft resin, epoxy resin, it's been amazing. So I don't really, that's why I've only been working with using craft resin, because I'm just super happy with it, and I don't I don't see the need to change it.
Sort of, obviously you mentioned about experience with craft resin. Is there a particular resin that you like using? So just use the 1:1 ratio, or do you like the deep pour, which is the 2:1 ratio? Is there a particular one that you've used?
Well, again, for the installs that I've been doing so far, I didn't need to use the deep pour resin, because I think mainly deep pour is for the pieces that you have them on the floor, or like if it's a table, or if it's kind of an installation or something that's actually the weight is being held by the ground, or because it's heavy, you'll end up heavy, and you, in some pieces you really need to get that kind of depth with a lot of resin. So I so far I haven't had anything like this, because most of the installations that I've done, strangely, they were mostly been in the ceiling.
So thank you so much for your answers and for your time today as well, running through everything. And I can imagine, sort of from myself and probably from those people who are watching this video as well, that they'll be taking on quite a lot of thoughts and sort of inspiration from everything, and sort of feedback about craft resin as well. Thank you very much, and I can't wait to see the next installations that you do. And
thank you.